Welcome to the Enchanted Sanctuary, the podcast for women ready to explore self-discovery and spiritual growth. Whether it's mastering your mindset, exploring energy work, or tapping into your intuition, this podcast is your go-to toolbox for spiritual and inner work. Think of it as a cozy chat with friends, where we celebrate the magic of growth and the beauty of becoming your true self. Each week, I'll talk with amazing women who share their personal journeys and the tools they've discovered to inspire and empower others. So if you're ready to embrace your path, discover new tools, and feel inspired, hit subscribe and join me in Enchanted Sanctuary. Hi, it's Nikki here and welcome back to the Sanctuary. And today, this episode is all about me and my journey. And I should be doing this for a couple of reasons. One, to give you a background on who is really behind this podcast. And because I'm interviewing people on their journeys, I think I need to speak about mine as well. But also because I will be interviewing my husband as well for a podcast because his journey is incredibly interesting. And I think he's got so much to share about his journey and the fact that how we both came together. And I don't really like to put names on things and boxes, but, if we're going to do it, I would say, he's like a twin flame because we have a high mission. Our relationship is not the classic, normal, like Hollywood relationship. We've been brought together for a higher cause. And so both of our journeys have been almost divinely guided, I would say. And you'll probably be able to see that when I start talking about it. So in 2001, I moved over to France with my then French husband and the father of my two daughters. They were 3 years old and 6 weeks at the time. And it had always been my dream to live here since, I don't know when, since the age of 12, I think it was, when I really made that decision. And that's for another podcast. And we moved over and I was kind of dabbling around, not knowing really what to do to get a job in France. What could I do? Until one day I was approached by a mother at the school gate asking me if I would like to teach English in the schools. The first thing I said when I moved over to France was that I would never teach English because that's what all the expats would do. Well, now I'll say never because that's what I ended up doing. I'd never taught in my life, let alone teaching English. And so I said yes. When the universe brings you a gift, you go for it. So I did. And I ended up doing that for 5 years. And the work began to dwindle out because the French education system didn't want to be paying any more for people like me to come in. They wanted to use their own teachers. And so in 2008, 2009, 2010, my marriage started breaking down and we divorced in 2010. And I really need to look for another job. And so I found an incredible job in a very alternative language school, helping French adults to speak English. And this job was really between training and coaching. It was the most incredible 15 years of my life and taught me a lot about myself, who I truly am. It showed me the true positive side of me. It gave me insights into my own strength, how I was able to truly listen to clients, to release their fears, to show them who they truly were, what their power was inside, gave them confidence. And it really was almost like a baseline for all the work that I do now. And so that kind of carried on until 2020, and we'll come back to that point because it's a very crucial point in my life. So during this time, I went on holiday into the south of France. I think it was around about 2011. And it was one day that I looked at my emails and there was a spam email there. Now, normally spam emails, you like me, probably just put them in the bin and don't even look at them. But something compelled me to look at this email, and it said something like, bring Reiki into your business. I had no idea what Reiki was. I'd heard the word. I thought it was something to do with massage. I had no idea. But I knew I had to do it, and it was a true calling. And at this time, I was on a coaching forum, I think it was, and I'd made friends with a girl, and we were talking about coaching, etc. And she said to me, "Nikki, you really need to do this. You know, that this Reiki is for you. It's obviously calling you. I know somebody in France can do it for you in English, and she lives about an hour away from you. She's German, and she'll do the Reiki for you in English." Thinking, wow, what is this? I'm obviously really meant to be doing it, because where I was living in France, a place called Nantes, there's not that many expats, certainly not at that time. And I certainly didn't know anybody in the Reiki world and the spiritual world. I just wasn't into to spirituality. I'd always felt different all my life. I didn't know why until now. But prior to that time, I knew that religion wasn't my thing. I knew that just felt so wrong for me. But I didn't know what else there was. I had no idea. And so I contacted this Reiki master, German Reiki master, and I said, "Look, I've no idea what this is, but I know I need to do it." And so she booked me in, and there I was at her door. And I was attuned to my Reiki level 1 in August 2011. And I remember just feeling the energy and thinking, wow, this just feels so right. Something is waking up in me. And I remember her telling me, "Are you ready? Because this is a life-changing moment. Are you ready to be attuned? Because your life is going to change. It will take away all the people that aren't serving you and bring you in the ones that are." And I said, "Yeah, I'm up for it." It was like the Matrix red pill, blue pill moment. And so I took it, and it did. It literally changed my life. I started to, do the self Reiki myself, but I didn't have any confidence at all in Reiki. And I think so many people at Reiki level 1 just don't feel that confident. They just, like me, I just felt, why me? Well, I don't have this, this energy. Of course, we don't have this energy. It's a channeled energy. But so many self-doubts came along. And in the following year, somebody came knocking on my door asking me if the cat that they'd seen that obviously really hurt, was it mine? And I said, I don't think so, but I'll come and have a look. So I went to see this cat, and this cat was laying on the floor, twitching. I think it had been hit by a car. It wasn't in a good way. And something told me to give it some Reiki. And so I did. And this cat just immediately calmed down to the point where I was able to touch his paws. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I've just done something here. And so 6 weeks later, I signed up to do my Reiki 2. And at Reiki 2, I said, I don't need to be a Reiki master. I'm going to stop here. But a year later, that voice inside me started saying, Reiki master, you need to do your Reiki master. And a woman who I really admired at the time just became tuned to be a Reiki master and was looking for people to attune. And so I was one of her first students to be attuned as a Reiki master. I now see Reiki for me as purely the path that I walk. It opened me up to so many other realms and possibilities and views of looking at the world. I don't use Reiki now as a healing modality. I use it really as walking the path, and it was the door to me opening up spiritually. During the time, I think around 2012, so my Reiki 2, I went into deep financial troubles. And that was partly to do with the job that I was in, where I was only getting paid for the training that I did. And if there's no contracts coming in, there'd be no pay coming in, but there was a whole load of bills and rent going out. But those times that kind of spanned about 6 or 7 years at that time of hell, it taught me so much. I'm so, so thankful for that journey now, because it taught me how to let go of fear and worry. It obviously taught me a lot about gratitude, which I've written, done some podcasts on. It taught me to let go of materialism, of really finding myself. It basically gave me all the tools and grounding for what I use now for other people. And I'm extremely grateful for those years. And it was kind of like, I wouldn't even say dark night of the soul, dark years of the ego being stripped away. And that finally came clear. Oh goodness, I can't remember when, 2016, 2017, I was finally financially clear. And so during that time, I was invited by a client of mine who was doing language training to go to a conference about this person talking to the body and talking to the organs. So, okay, then I'll go. It was all in French. And this conference, this man was using muscle testing to talk to the organs of people's bodies and to find out what was really making them sick. Something in that trainer was like, oh my goodness, I so need to do this. This is really speaking to me. But I asked about the training. I think the training was something stupid like, I don't know, 10,000 euros. And I thought, well, that's it. I can't do that on the back burner. You know, it's just not the right time for now. And then it was probably about 6 months later, I was listening to Empower Radio, which sadly now is closed, but it was a personal development radio. And on there, I switched on the radio in the morning, and it was Bradley Nelson talking about the emotion code. And it was like, oh my goodness, this is almost like what I'd seen in the conference. I thought, this is amazing, I've got to do this. So I went onto their website, and lo and behold, they had a 50% offer. And so I signed up immediately. And by December 2016, I had become a certified emotion code practitioner. That has now become the backbone of my work as well. And it's, you know, it's just so incredible how the universe conspires to bring everything that you need. You know, I never went looking for emotion code. It came to me. And I think I've learned that through human design as well, that you don't need to go chasing for things. Things will always come to you exactly when you need them because everything is planned out anyway. And so I started working a lot with emotions, with emotion code, and that began to develop over the years. And in 2017, a friend of mine contacted me and said, Nikki, I really think you need to use these essential oils, these doTERRA oils, because look, you know, they're working with emotions. Thinking, oh my God, this is unbelievable. I'd used essential oils all my life. I'd always been intrigued by aromatherapy. But these oils working specifically with emotions, it just had me right there and then. And I signed up with doTERRA in 2017. Because it just tied so completely into what I was doing. And during the time, when we go back to the end of my divorce and the end of my marriage around about 2008, is when I started to paint. I'd always been surrounded creatively by my mother, who was always having some creative project on at Christmas, and throughout the year, there's always something happening. And so I'd always had this creative feeling. I always loved creativity, but I actually never went in to do anything creative. And just to put in brackets there, all my life I wanted to do art. At the age of 12, I walked into an art gallery in the south of France and said, I want to do art in France. I walked out, I went to do science. And that's because, you know, I loved art, I loved creativity, but I just didn't see myself as an artist. I didn't see what I could do with it, how I could make a career of it. And I loved science. I was really intrigued by science. So off I went into the science realm, and I actually started to work as a biochemist in England, completely against everything that I was. But hey, I went down that path. And so at the end of my marriage, I started to do some creative workshops. I started just to invite people in, we'll have fun, did a bit of, I don't know, deco-patch or painting or polymer clay. And it was during this time that the creativity started to wake up in me. And so I started painting. I look back, I think it was also a way for me to express my emotions through going through what I now see as obviously the marriage breaking down as a way to express myself. And so I think it was probably around, I don't know, 2015, 2016, I started to paint more and more. And I came across an artist, and I think it was probably through Pinterest, called Flora Bowley. and her work, she layers her paint, and it made me see a new way of painting. And she was very intuitive, and she brings yoga into her painting, and she just blew my mind. I just soaked up everything that she did. And so I started painting in layers, and the painting process changed, and I began to see that what was happening on the paper was also a reflection of what was happening inside. And I began to feel emotion. There was tears coming up, and thinking, wow, that there's something here. And so I started running more workshops around this just to see what was happening. And yet people were feeling it too. And in 2018, a friend of mine on Facebook just gave this throwaway remark of, oh, why don't you put some oil into your paint for fun? I thought, wow, that could be an interesting idea. Let's make it really, let's up the game a bit and make it really kind of aromatic. So I popped some oils into the paint, and something clicked. I was in the middle of a canvas, and the whole process changed again. The emotions felt deeper. The oils that I was choosing was taking the emotions so much deeper. And I thought, I'm onto something here. This is massive. And so once again, I started running workshops to try out on people to see. And yes, the people were really feeling what I was feeling. But it never went really further than that. I kind of left it there, and just, I think because looking back, I didn't have the confidence in myself. I didn't see myself as taking anything big. It was just kind of almost like as a hobby for me. And especially because I was already working during the day as a language trainer, that was taking up a lot of my time. So it's kind of dabbling along in the background and just having fun doing these workshops. I was still in France and felt like this was it. I was loving my life. I ran a couple of workshops retreats for French people in English with personal development, and that was just amazing. And that gave me a base for now what I call emotive boards, which is an emotional take on vision boards. So a lot of my time there was during this time from 2008 to 2020 was building up this whole base for me of my toolkit. And it's only now that I actually realise this, talking on my podcast, I actually see that these years were giving me the foundations of all the tools I need, that everything I have is here. 2020, well, we all remember 2020, don't we, for lockdown and everything that was happening there, this massive transformation. And at that time, I was in a relationship with somebody. I'd moved in 2019. The 1st of January 2020, I knew that the relationship was over. Something told me I can't be doing this anymore. 1 week later, we had finished, and by the end of January, I'd moved out. Now, just prior to moving out, and this is a real example of, trusting the process and asking the divine, I was due to move out from his place. I had nowhere to go. I didn't have enough money to have a rented accommodation so quickly as that, like within a week. It just wasn't possible. And so I remember going to bed and asking divine, please show me a place I can go. Please give me a solution for this. I woke up and the first thought was, oh my goodness, my ex-mother-in-law's house. My divorce was a friendly divorce. We celebrated with champagne. I was still really good friends with him, with the father of my children. And his parents' house had lain empty for about 3 years because they were in a nursing home. And this house was just empty. I thought, oh my God, I could stay there in exchange for like cleaning, keeping up and paying the bills, etc. And he agreed. So a week later, I moved out. And I moved into this place, and it was like, oh, thank goodness for that. That's it. I'm out. And then 1 week, it must have been about a week prior to lockdown, I came out of my language training job at about 5:30. Got in my car, which was a newish car, and switched it on. and the clock showed 4:30. Now, normally when this happens, you say, "Oh, stupid clock," I'll deal with that later. But no, this was different. I had to stop and think, where am I? What have I been doing during the day? Okay, I did a group today. If I've been training a group, I started at 9, I finished at 5. It can't be 4:30. And looking back, that was a timeline shift. I was actually being shifted like a train changing tracks. Okay, this is weird. UK time, 1 hour, from behind French time. And then I went to connect my phone to the Bluetooth. My phone had been eradicated from the car system. And another phone appeared, and it was some English name, I don't know, Mr. Smith's phone. Where I was, there was no English people around. I don't have any English people in my car. How can I be picking up? And how can that be integrated in my Bluetooth system? I didn't know who it was, thinking, what are you telling me here? And it was like the divine was shouting to me. So, English time, an English phone. And then 3 days later, I looked at my purse. This was a new purse I just bought. I looked inside of there. There was a £1 coin. Now, I hadn't been back to England for 2 years. I didn't have English money. It's certainly not in my new purse that I just, transferred my old stuff to. And it was then that I realised that Divine was telling me, go back to the UK. Now, this actually brings up emotion for me because it's such a point in my life. As I told you before, I'd always wanted to live in France. I felt lost in the UK since a little girl. Home was France for me. I was living my dream in France. The divine was asking me to give up my dream and move back to the UK, a country where I just did not feel at home in. And I'd always wanted to be French. And I remember my ex-partner saying to me, Nikki, you have to accept your accent. And I didn't have a strong accent. There was a twang of English, but I speak fluent French. He said, you have to accept that you're never going to be French, you are English. And it was like somebody had slapped me across the face. And then I realised that, I'd escaped my English side of me all my life. I denied being English. And here was the divine asking me to go back to the UK. So lockdown for me was then preparation for me to move back. I spent hours on YouTube watching people who were filming in the streets of the UK towns, so that I could get into the mindset of being English again, of being English, being in England and living in England. And so at the end of lockdown, I think it was in August 2020, I moved back to the UK. And I moved into my mother's home. So I moved away from France. So I left my home. I had to give up my cats. I found them a beautiful family. I had to leave my daughters who were old enough. They were 18 and 21. I gave up my job, my car. I went back with just 30 small boxes. I let go of everything. I had nothing with me apart from 30 small boxes. No job to go to, no home to go to, no money to go to, nothing. And this is such a strong lesson again in totally trusting the path, trusting what the divine is showing, totally letting go and just being in that flow of the moment of just knowing that if I'm going to jump, I'm going to be caught. There's going to be a net here for me. Just trust it completely. And I don't think I've ever trusted the universe so strongly as this moment. To give up my French dream and go to a country that I didn't feel at home in. And so I moved into my mother's, and it was kind of like going back to my teen years, hearing my mother playing Desert Island Discs on Radio 4 doing the cooking. It was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm a teenager. So there's a lot of healing going back to the moments before moving to France, to really healing that deep the deep teenage years. And so there I was living there. I found shared accommodation. I signed up to get benefits, so that's it. Okay, I've got finance coming in. I've got a place to live, and then I decided, okay, to work, I'm going to set up as a language trainer on my own business. So that started, I started making plans for that. Just began to get settled and made peace with being English. I actually had to get to that point of saying, the door is closed on France. France is goodbye. I am now English. I'm living in England. And to feel really good with that. And then in November 2020, Steve, my now husband, and I connected. Now, we'd been friends on Facebook for 18 months, thereabouts. And we enjoyed seeing each other's comments. It's just nice to see the other ones pop up, but it was nothing more than that. It was just like, oh, hello, I just put a comment on. And I kind of felt like I just wasn't worthy of his friendship. He would never accept to be my friend. And at the time, he was thinking the same thing. And he will tell you his story as well, probably on the podcast that will follow. And in the November, something happened and he messaged me on Facebook. And then within a week, that conversation was just non-stop. It was just one thing after another. We just connected at such a deep level that we felt that this was something so deep, so important. And it felt like I'd loved him all of my lives since the beginning of time. It felt that deep of a love. And just prior to that, I remember I knew, if I just skip back a step, and Steve will talk about this as well, that when I think we were still connecting, obviously when I was moving back to the UK, and at that moment, I knew he was going to say something. And when I moved back to the UK, he says, I don't know why, we've never met, but I miss you. And it was very strange because it woke him up. And it was like my energy was now out of France. It was in the UK, and he was feeling that. And then he admitted that he was falling in love with me. And normally in other past relationships I'd probably jump into the relationship thinking, oh, somebody loves me, I'll go for this one, the old people pleaser type of thing. This time I knew I had to pause, and I stopped and closed my eyes and asked the divine, what do I do here? And they said, go into your heart, drop into your heart, and you will know. And so I did. And it was like I just saw all these black moths just fly out of my heart. All this black just come out, and Steve's was just pouring straight into my heart. And so we knew. And within a week, that's it. I was going to be moving back to France. And so in 2021, January of 2021, just after Brexit, I moved back to France with my 30 boxes. My 30 boxes, in actual fact, was shipped before Brexit. They were shipped over at Christmas time. So my boxes arrived in France before I did. And just to put you in the picture, Steve and I had only called via Zoom 3 times. Everything else was on message. So we'd hardly seen each other physically. We'd never met each other physically. We'd only seen each other on camera 3 times. And on January 11th, I drove from the UK down to Steve's in the Charente, which for those of you who don't know France, it's about 3/4 of the way down. And I drove all the way down, drove to his house, opened the door, and more or less said, honey, I'm home. And we both agreed that it felt like I'd just stepped through the door after being shopping. He felt the same thing, I felt the same thing. And so there I was, 24/7, living with the man that I'd never met before ever. Now, normally in a relationship, you would ring the doorbell, wouldn't you, before walking in? But no, I just opened the door as if I was home. That's how different it was. And then things started really speeding up. And this is where Steve's story will then come in on another podcast. that he started having endless visions, and he already had visions all his life, but this was highly intense. Something was happening with our energies now together. And it was a very, very powerful story. And I think that's worth a whole podcast on its own, because with all the visions he had, so visions, and he will tell you this as well, aren't just images. He receives images that we don't even know what they are. We've never seen them before in our lives. Sometimes he said, I don't know what it is. I've never seen it before. I don't even know how to describe it because I don't know what it is. But then we'll find a way to research and find out what it is, and it can be absolutely mind-blowing. And so all the visions he had, it was probably about over the space for about 6 months. We made, I think it was a 36-page document of all the visions he had, all the research we did that took us down the holes of Egyptology, of the 100 Years' War, of the Sumerians, of the kings and queens of England, of France, of so much. I learned so much about the Egyptian gods and goddesses. It was just unbelievable. And the fact that Sekhmet, the goddess, the lion goddess, came to me several times, to the point where Steve actually saw her face on me. I felt her energy come through, so she was coming through a heck of a lot, and it was so, so intense. So something was definitely shifting. During this time, it felt like a lifetime. But actually, I moved over in January, and in the March, I put a post on a doTERRA Facebook group about what I was doing with the oils. Now, in this group, it was an emotions group. I hadn't been in there for quite a while, probably about a year. And I saw a post come up about marjoram. And I've been using marjoram oil on my back. And it sent me back into the group. And it was almost like this little thing saying, like, come on, come back into this group. So in I went. And I just literally put a post up that this is what I've been doing. I've been adding oils into the paint. And within a few hours, I had about 500 comments. I've never had that many comments on a post before. And all these people were asking, what is this? Where can we learn it? How can we learn it? What's all this about? And I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And so in a very, very short space of time, I had to get some courses up and running to teach these people. I'd never designed a course before, ever in my life. On paper, nor on the computer, via internet, on Zoom, never, zilch. And so I had to write out step by step the process of my painting and name it. And it was Steve that gave me the name of Intuitive Expression, so art with intuitivity. So Intuitive Expression was born. And I started to run facilitator courses, which ran over 2 or 3 years. And I trained people in America, Italy, Lithuania, England, France, Australia. And so Intuitive Expression was finally born of the layering of paint and the addition of essential oils. And that had life-changing experiences. Within the space of a 6-week course, people's lives were changing. It had me in tears. Every time we had group calls, I was crying because of the transformations that people were having. It was unbelievable. So I knew that I'd been guided to do this, and it just felt so, so special. And then it kind of went underground. It just didn't feel like the time anymore for Intuitive until now. And now it's coming back, and it's coming back in a whole new way of being. And I feel it was a tool that's ready for what's happening on the earth right now. And so here we are. And it's been such a ride. And when I talk about this journey, I've tried to condense it down into 30, into a short space of time. What's 30 minutes so far? But I think my journey shows that when you truly trust the process, you trust the divine, you take the leaps, you know that when you take a leap that you'll be caught, that there is always, you're never alone, that there's always help around you, you're always guided, that magic does happen, that synchronicities do happen, that people come into your path if you're open to looking for that people will always give you the messages or give you the tools or give you the pointers to take you on the journey. And, looking back since I divorced, and as I said, my divorce, we celebrated with champagne. We stayed really good friends and we helped each other through probably some very, very difficult times. And that divorce was my waking up moment. That was the time when I knew that, I had to split to become myself. To find myself, I had to be by myself. And to really enjoy being with myself. I lived on my own for 13 years after that. And to really be at peace with me, to love just being with me, and to love me in such a healthy way of knowing that I'm okay. If I can be with me, then I can be with other people too. And so, from 2009, it's when the whole journey took. So from 2009, so 11 years, to 2020 was me being given all the tools I would need. So from then 2020 to now is when all the tools are being laid out to be used to help people like you on your spiritual journey. And looking back and talking about it, it just feels so compact and so intense. And I began to see that life, we're like laying on a river. And this goes in so many ways that the feminine energy is the water. It's that flow. It's being in the flow. It's the water's being emotion of just laying back and allowing that water to take you. But the masculine is a riverbank. It's what contains the water. It's what holds the water, what gives it security, because without those banks, the water is nothing. It just lays and floods. So the masculine energy contains that water and allows it to flow, which is where Steve and I's relationship is. He contains me. He gives me that security so that I can then flow and find my path. And when you learn to let go, it's like just laying back on the water. Those moments when, you try and struggle in the water, you're kicking and screaming, and that's when you sink, when you panic. But if you just lay back, the water takes you. And it feels like all my life, my path has meandered and landed me on different beaches, on different shorelines for a length of time before we head off and go again. And my journey has taken me on, as I said, like with working in biochemistry labs, with positivity coaching, with colour therapy, colour analysis, my art. It's taken me with the emotional healing, with oils, that there's so many things that I've been through. They all become part of me now. But what I've also found with that we're never really at the destination. We're never really just doing one thing. That one thing changes. And this is where it's about allowing and not fixing or going for one thing. It's heading that way, but knowing that the divine will also take us and allow us to flow. And so here I am with you, giving you this podcast and showing you that through all these people that talk on my podcast, that the spiritual journey is so different for everybody. It's so individual because we're all facets of the one energy, which is the divine God source, Christ consciousness energy. But we're all facets of that, so we cannot compare because each facet is so unique. And so it's about following your own journey and trusting and just knowing that when something is given to you by the divine, it's to take it. I took it, and this is where I am now. And I just feel so privileged to be living this life that I am. And, the fact of coming back to Steve and our relationship, he is here to give me, in the masculine way, the security and the stability and the space. At the beginning, it was to find me. It was the first time I could be me and find out who I truly am without the people pleasing, without trying to be something for somebody else. But then also giving me the space and that peace for me to live my mission, to be completely into what I am here to be doing. And I think what's happening on the planet right now deserves a whole podcast in itself, because we're right on this transformational point. And this year, I think, is going to be so poignant in 2025. Not only it's a 9-year of the year of transformation, but it's also halfway. 2025 is halfway between 2020 and 2030. And so it's a pivotal point. And this is why I think so many of us now are stepping up, waking up, and finding our paths. And I think this is why this podcast has been done this year, is because it's time for people to trust their own paths. And I think this is what this podcast is doing, is helping people to trust that their path is their path. Yes, there can be similarities of how the divine shows up, of the messages, of the synchronicities, but how they show up for you is your very own unique path. So I'm going to end it there because it's 40 minutes and it's intense. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to this podcast. And as you can see, from my life, that there's so many stories that lead into other podcasts. And I do hope, that you find the connection between what I have just talked about, and then when Steve talks about how our journeys then come together. And, I think I've got a whole other podcast on that for when Steve has done his, about our joint project that we have together. So thank you so much for listening. I would really love you to put any comments in, your thoughts, or how your life is showing up, the synchronicities that have happened to you. But just thank you so much for being with me. It's, opening up my personal life is something I've always wanted to talk about, because there's so much in my life to help other people that I hope you'll find something in it to take away to help you. Have an absolutely beautiful day and enjoy your journey. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found inspiration, tools, and a touch of magic to support your journey. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who might need it. And if you'd like to dive deeper, visit my website at nikkihoward.com, where you can learn about my upcoming membership, the Enchanter Sanctuary, a community for like-minded souls just like you, full of tools, creativity, and guidance to help you clear the path back to your true self. Until next time, take care of yourself, trust your path, and remember you are never alone on this journey.